All right, let's jump right in. Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we are unpacking something we're calling the permissioned frontier. Basically, we're looking at how a massive wave of incoming government AI regulations might completely rewrite the rulebook for tech startups. For years now, AI has really felt like the Wild West, hasn't it? It's been wide open, incredibly fast, and just fiercely competitive. But we are watching that open developer sandbox rapidly transform into a highly regulated, tightly controlled infrastructure layer. And honestly, that brings up a pretty heavy question. Is the golden age of AI startups already over? Because as governments step in to decide exactly who gets access to the absolute cutting-edge models, we really have to wonder if we're basically sacrificing the next generation of tech innovators all in the name of safety. Okay, so let's break this down by contrasting two wildly different realities for businesses. We all know the legendary Silicon Valley mantra, right? Move fast and break things. Historically, the one massive advantage a tiny startup had over a giant corporate competitor was pure, blistering speed. You test an idea, you build it, and you iterate overnight. But compare that to the new reality we might be facing. Wait and file paperwork. If access to the absolute best, state-of-the-art AI models gets locked behind layers of staggered government approvals, that speed advantage, it completely evaporates. If your new product relies on top-tier AI reasoning to actually be useful, but you are stuck in a digital waiting room, kind of like a DMV for tech, forced to use older, weaker models while you wait, your product is just inherently going to feel second-rate. So what actually happens when you mix high-tech development with heavy compliance hurdles? Well, you end up with a divided system, a literal two-tier AI economy. Think about it. Complex approval processes naturally favor organizations that already have deep pockets and huge legal teams, right? That creates Tier 1, big tech companies, defense contractors, and government partners who easily get rubber-stamped as trusted early access providers. And then you have Tier 2. That's your startups, your indie developers, your outsiders. They are forced to build their products using delayed, heavily restricted, or just visibly dumber public versions of the AI. And this is a huge deal, because transformative innovation almost always comes from weird, unexpected outsiders. Locking the best tools away means we might get a future of safer-looking legacy companies, but way fewer of those mind-blowing breakthroughs. To put that into perspective, let's look at the actual timeline disparity that has founders completely terrified right now. Imagine a massive AI lab finishes a ridiculously powerful new model in month 1. But because of government mandates, they can't release it fully. They have to put out a neutered public version while keeping the absolute best stuff internally. By month 2, that same AI lab could just launch its own superior product, let's say a super advanced legal assistant, built entirely on their unrestricted internal model. Meanwhile, an independent startup trying to build a competing legal assistant is stuck waiting around until, say, month 6, just to get API approval for the restricted version. The big labs wouldn't even need to sell their APIs to startups anymore. They could just instantly render any startup's product obsolete by competing with them directly on day 1. And look, that timeline is an absolute nightmare for product planning, but it's even worse for fundraising. Startups absolutely need certainty to build a roadmap, but government-controlled release schedules? They introduce permanent, unfixable unpredictability. How do you design a new feature if you literally can't guarantee when a model will drop or if the government will even let you use it? Investors run from unpredictability. Venture capitalists are already starting to ask founders directly, do you have the right contacts at major AI labs? What on earth is your contingency plan if a competitor gets government clearance for a frontier model and you don't? Now you might be thinking, hey, what about open source? Can't startups just use that? Well, for a long time, open source was the ultimate backup plan. If big tech APIs got too pricey or too restrictive, you could just grab an open source model and run it on your own hardware. But that brings us to the next falling domino here. The open source safety net is vanishing. Government scrutiny isn't just focused on the closed models from big tech anymore. Highly capable, locally hosted open source models, especially foreign ones like DeepSeek or GLM, are increasingly being flagged as major national security risks. If regulators start banning or demanding impossible compliance for open source alternatives, founders could wake up tomorrow and find out their entire tech stack is suddenly illegal. To be totally fair here, we have to look objectively at why governments want these bans. It really boils down to one word: control. See, if an AI is doing something dangerous through a closed API, the creator can just hit a big red button and instantly revoke that user's access. Open source AI is a completely different beast. Once an open source model is released into the wild, downloaded and put on private servers, that's it. The genie's out of the bottle. It is physically impossible for the creator to alter its behavior or stop a malicious user after the fact. And for regulators, that total inability to monitor or kill switch a program is a giant flashing red flag. And that lack of control feeds straight into some very real, very serious national security fears. Specifically, there's this terrifying concept known as sleeper agents. Recent research has actually proven that AI models can be trained to act completely perfectly during safety testing, right? But they contain hidden, dormant programming that only wakes up and executes malicious code when exposed to a highly specific, secret trigger word or phrase. And the crazy part? This malicious programming can actually survive fine-tuning, meaning there is basically no reliable way to verify if a downloaded foreign model is actually safe. There is a very real fear right now that foreign open-source models could be Trojan horses, embedded with cyber-attack triggers that make local hosting a catastrophic security risk. And look, this isn't just politicians getting paranoid. Major, highly respected industry figures are sounding the exact same alarm. Dario Amodei, the CEO of Anthropic, has explicitly warned that while early open-source models are relatively harmless, continuing to scale up these massive open-weight models is heading down a, quote, very dangerous path. The expert consensus is shifting. These incredibly powerful models, which remember, cannot be revoked once downloaded, could hyper-accelerate massive misinformation campaigns right now and potentially pose severe biological and chemical risks in the near future. So the arguments for strict regulation, they are rooted in very legitimate, high-stakes security realities. But hold on, there is another side to this coin that we have to talk about. Beyond the national security arguments, there is a massive, usually unspoken, financial incentive behind this huge push for open-source bans. We call it the incentive trap. Because while public safety is the outward justification, heavily regulating open-source AI also just so happens to be the ultimate bulletproof shield for corporate AI monopolies. Let's follow the money for a second and look at how the AI ecosystem actually operates today. Right now, smart startups use a really clever trick called model routing. Instead of paying eye-watering API fees to big tech for every single tiny user prompt, they route about 75% of their easy, repetitive tasks to essentially free open-source models. Then, they only pay for the expensive closed APIs for the 25% of tasks that require heavy-duty, complex reasoning. It is a brilliant, highly efficient way for a startup to keep its burn rate low, which ultimately means a cheaper subscription price for you, the consumer. But if open-source models get banned or heavily restricted, that whole cost-saving strategy goes right out the window. Poof, gone. And the market impact of that is immediate. Every startup suddenly becomes 100% reliant on a tiny handful of extremely expensive, government-cleared AI labs. And who does that benefit? It perfectly protects the revenue streams and the multi-billion-dollar valuations of companies like OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google. By wiping out the cheap, local competition, the entire market is forced to rent intelligence by the token from a few massive tech monopolies. And make no mistake, that inevitable price hike is going to trickle right down to the consumer. So, as we wrap up this explainer, this leaves us with a really massive, lingering question. As we hurtle toward this highly regulated, permissioned infrastructure layer, we have to keep our eyes wide open about the outcomes. Look, there are absolutely terrifying security risks associated with frontier AI, and governments literally have a duty to keep us safe from them. But we also have to ask, will these incoming safety regulations actually protect the public from harm? Or are they ultimately just going to protect big tech's profit margins by quietly choking out the startup ecosystem? It is a razor-thin line between securing our future and ensuring we actually still have innovators left to build it. Keep questioning the infrastructure around you, and we'll catch you in the next explainer.